Nice. Get a decent response. 9 o'clock in the morning, a little darker outside. So this is actually really great. So yes, we are going to talk about the Beatitudes today. But at first I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea of upside down living. We really do want to get into the core. By the way, I love my remote controls. We do want to get into the core of this teaching of Christ. I really want to get into what did Jesus really say. We started off through the summer, the Bible from 60,000 feet. We then moved on to the Why series, so which are kind of broader kind of topics, bigger topics that lead you down a certain path. But we really wanted to get into what is the core of Christ's message. What did he say? And so we want to get into that. So we want to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of the Christian life. We really want to say what it means to be in this world but not of this world. And I don't know about you, but I grew up with my mother saying, Dwayne, remember, you are in this world, you're not of this world. And I really didn't have a clue what she meant, so this is going to be as good for me as it is for anybody else. Draws us into that deeper life with Christ and then encourages us to understand ourselves better and invite God into the conversation. And I think more than anything else, that is going to be the core. In knowing and understanding ourselves and then inviting God into the conversation. That's always been key for me. I've been talking about that for a number of years when I finally realized that the whole idea of our daily disciplines was to invite God into our own personal growth. All right, just making sure you're all with me. All right. So that's the whole series, just as an overview. We are going to get into next week. I believe Debbie's on tap to talk about the heart of the matter. I think that's absolutely beautiful, and going to be into some of the practical stuff. What does it mean to be the salt and the light into this world? And then from there, we're moving into the 30th. It's between you and God, about rather than looking at other people for our approval, it's, well, what would it be like if we started to look to God for our approval? November the 6th, we're getting into Be Wise. I'm not doing that one for obvious reasons, but it is really starting to put into practice what Jesus said. The 13th is going to be a great day. Seek first the kingdom. Talking about storing up treasures where that would be a good place to invest our resources, time, energy, money. It's going to be a great day. And then November 20th, the way to abundant life is narrow. Just being aware and be aware of those people that could lead you astray and understand what that really means. But today, we are going to get into the Beatitudes. And so I thought, Beatitudes, I've heard about this my entire life. I've heard about the topic. I've heard hundreds of messages on the Beatitudes. But I really wanted to start off with kind of framing what this might look like. And I like to tell stories, so I'm going to go to a story. So there was a minister, not necessarily Jamie, but it could have been, was teaching a Sunday school class. So he asked the class, if I sold my house and I had a huge garage sale and sold everything I have, would that get me into heaven? And all the kids said, no, that's not going to do it. Well, if I lived out or tried to live into the Beatitudes, and if I served my church really well, would that get me into heaven? And again, the kids came back and said, no, that's not going to happen. Then he said, well, what happens if I was kind to the animals and I gave candy to all the kids? Would that get me into heaven? And again, surprisingly enough, even though they hesitated a little bit, they said, no, that's not going to do it. And so the minister took a step back and said, okay, so really what is going to get me into heaven? Thinking that this is going to get heady and this is going to be right where he wants to be. Little Johnny in the back of the class raises his hand and said, well, first you have to die. Anyway, that really isn't the spirit of the Beatitudes, but I thought it was really funny. So we got to bring it out. So what did the whole idea of the Beatitudes, what does Beatitudes actually mean? It means happy. So how do you be happy? What does it mean to be happy? What does it look like to be really happy? You know, happiness has always been a really fleeting kind of an emotion. Anybody here happy all the time? No, nobody here is. But what does it mean to be happy? So we're going to talk about that as we're going through. The whole idea about being blessed, you're going to see blessed one after the other as a result of going through the Beatitudes. And that word blessed kind of means wealthy. It kind of means happy, maybe even being in sync with God. And so as we're going through each one of these Beatitudes, just be thinking about that, just maybe from a different kind of a perspective. You know, this whole teaching of Christ really is the beginning of the transition between the Old Testament, you know, which is more about the law and a lot of the stuff that happens and thou shalt nots that are in the Old Testament, and it starts to transition over into that whole idea of grace. It starts to inform what the law was all about. You know, in the book of Proverbs, it's the same kind of writing in the Proverbs as it is in Matthew 5. It seems like, and this is my computer mind, a whole lot of if-then statements. You know, if you focus on this, then this is going to happen, which I thought was interesting to align the two pieces together. So the questions that come to my mind as I've been thinking about this, and I want you to be thinking as we go through, have we all heard the Beatitudes so often that they don't really shock us anymore? And it's kind of like, oh yeah, I've heard that before, yeah, it's all good. The next one, which one of the Beatitudes do you want to live into a little more? As we go through, just be thinking about that, because there is a test. What would happen if we started living out the Beatitudes? And then lastly, how attractive would we be to the world if we lived out the Beatitudes? I don't have it today, but I saw a video on Facebook this week. It was an interview with Princess Diana. It was brought back out. And I have to say, it was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. Just her perspective and her spirit. She was being asked about whether she believed she was going to be queen one day. And she said, no, I don't. And just the way that she came across really did express what it was, express the whole idea about what it would be if we, what we would look like if we lived out the Beatitudes. And of course, as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, when I was younger, I had an opportunity. We were living in St. John, New Brunswick, and Prince Charles and Princess Diana came into town, and so big celebration. They were celebrating St. John's 100th year or something, or whatever it was. I don't know. Don't really care at this point. But they were celebrating it, and my mother decided that we were going to get dressed up all in the same garb as what would have been 100 years ago. So I had the full suit, I had the big socks, I had the buckle on my shoes, I had the top hat, like the whole 9 yards. I looked fine, let me tell you. So standing there waiting, and they're coming along, and they're just going up the main street in St. John, which is really about from here to the wall. But they were coming up that main street, and everybody was all excited about them. And she comes by, and I said, I'm getting in on this one. And I took a step up, and I got to shake her hand. And as a little boy, I did not wash that hand for an extended period of time. But after she shook my hand, I do remember her going to my mother. And the hat that my mother had on contained an ostrich feather. And she knew what it was, and she stopped and took a moment to have a conversation with Mom and just said, this is what was going on. You know, here is someone who really was married into the royal family, but yet she stopped to have that conversation. And that has always stuck to me over all these all these years. Anyway, so let's jump into the passage of Scripture. I want to say a big shout out to Ian. This is his image that he came up with. This is actually the temple of the Beatitudes. And he's got a picture of it, and he put it in there, and I had seen an image similar, so I was quite excited when I saw that. Thank you, Ian, for putting that in there. So let me set this up a little bit. Jesus was doing some teaching, and he was wandering around, and of course, wherever Jesus went, there were crowds. And so Jesus took a look around, and it says here, Jesus saw the crowds. He went up to the mountain. I'm going to stop right there, because really, there really aren't any mountains in that area. Like we're only talking about, 509 feet is the peak of this mountain, so to speak. But Jesus saw the crowds, and he withdrew a little bit. And the interesting thing here, he sat down, and his disciples came to him. Other versions of the Scripture say those that were committed to him, those that were apprenticed to him. So here's Jesus. I'm building a big crowd here. I'm going to watch this. It's going to be really cool. And well, this is not really what I'm looking for. So he steps away and takes that small group of people with him, those that are closest to him, and he take them with him. And then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Oh, well, it's red. That's cool." So first one here, and I think out of all of them, this one is got to be one of my most favorite. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you think about that, and you're just thinking about sad sack kind of people that are wandering around, right? Maybe that's just the way I look at it. I don't know. But when I think about that, it's like the poor in spirit is more of a total reliance on God. Like, where are we getting our own honor from? You know, are we happy with who we are and who God has created us to be? Are we growing in that? Are we maturing in that? So we start thinking about our relationship to God and our reliance on God as part of this. It starts to take on a whole different frame rather than that poor in spirit kind of a perspective. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the more that we lean into God and lean into who he is, the more that we understand that we are reliant on him for all that we have, it really does start to set us up well. In fact, this particular beatitude is really the main point. And then the rest that are coming are all kind of indicators of what that will look like. There was a grandmother who was celebrating her golden wedding anniversary, and someone out of the crowd asked her about, how did you survive or how did you live through 50 years of being married? Now, I'm not sure why they didn't ask the grandfather, but anyway, they asked the grandmother what it was all about. And she said, well, before we got married, I thought I would sit down and write down my future husband's top 10 faults. Yeah, I know. Not everybody sits down and writes them down. Anyway, so we're going to write those top 10 down, and then I'm going to decide at that moment that I'm going to overlook those 10 faults. And she said, and the person that was asking her said, so how did that work out? Like, is that the secret? So what happened? And the grandmother said, well, actually, I never bothered to write them down. She said, I just decided that throughout our marriage, that every time my husband did something that really ticked me off, I would just say, that was on that list. Isn't that great? Right? We start understanding that reliance on God. We don't know what's to come. We don't really know when we first get married what our spouse's top 10 faults are. Oh, come on. You got to buy in with that one. That was a good spot for it. Amen. I'm just saying, because we've all been there. Rebecca's got a good list, actually, because I have a lot of faults. Anyway, let's move on. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are those who are going through difficulties. I've also, really start to think about this whole idea of mourning and meekness and how they start to come together. Because when you're mourning, have you ever noticed that you start to look at most everything differently? You're presented with a choice. You're presented with, I need more of God. I need more of those relationships that really build me up and help me to grow. Or you can go the other way and just start saying, oh, poor me, right? But this whole idea of mourning sets us up for a different perspective. And it sets us up as a wonderful opportunity to start leaning more into God. Because those that mourn, they will be comforted. I believe it's 1 Timothy. Why does God allow us to go through these difficulties? So that we can encourage and help those that are going through the same thing because of the blessing that God has given to us as a result. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, the quiet, the gentle. And I've almost wondered sometimes about those people that are, easily imposed on. Those people that are kind of reserved a little bit and saying, oh, well, I can maybe take advantage of this situation a little bit. So I've always struggled with the word meek, but as I've been thinking about this over the last while, I start to realize, well, if it's framed with blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those that rely on God, our meekness actually comes out of a place of strength because we are connected so closely to God that it's easy for us to take a step back and play that second fiddle, to relax a little bit, and to come out of things maybe with a little bit of a more confidence as being more complete. Because it says, for they will inherit the earth. Those things that we cannot buy, that self-confidence, that assuredness, that feeling of completeness only comes from our connection with God. I like that one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. The Spiritual Growth Weekend is coming up in a couple of weeks. And one of the things that I'm really excited about it is because, one, we get to hear about Bullseye from Jamie and Debbie, but as we go into the different streams, one stream on Bible and prayer and the other on becoming who you are, your purpose in life, and sharing Christ. It's a time for all of us to come together, to learn together, to grow together, to explore areas in our faith that we didn't or we haven't maybe to this point. Blessed are the merciful, those that are people that care. By the way, I'm sorry, but I know I've got about 2.5 minutes to go through each one of these Beatitudes, and I feel rushed. Blessed are the merciful, showing people that care. I've been very fortunate in my life. I have been blessed in my life because I've watched different people as they love and care for others. I watched my dad as he cared for people. As a minister, I had that privilege. But I have to say, the person that did it better was my mother. Watching how she was always looking to serve into someone's life. Someone was hurting, and only she would know about it, or she and Dad would know about it, and she would immediately go and make something. Whether it was a casserole, a pie. I was always hoping for pie because I know where one came from. There was another one, and anyway. But the way that she cared for people, she reached into their lives and did it with such grace and strength. It was one of the most beautiful things to watch, but only that can come out of that connection with Christ again. Absolutely fascinating to me. Blessed are the pure in heart. I had to really do some thinking on this one. Really do some studying because I don't get this pure in heart piece. Because I know I am flawed and I'm regularly making mistakes. But maybe this being pure in heart is is understanding our reliance on God, and adding in the whole piece about hunger and thirsting after righteousness. And maybe as we go along our journey, our relationship to Christ deepens and our heart changes as a result, and our default behaviors, which generally are selfish and hurtful, start to change to become something different, something more beautiful. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Every time I've heard the word peacekeeper or peacemaker, it makes me stop and think, because there's a huge difference between the two. The peacekeeper is there just to observe and to not get involved, and to try to help avoid some of the problems that are going on. A peacemaker is someone who's going to stand into the gap and try to bring two different parties together. And I love that perspective, because I think as Christ followers, that's one of the things that we really want to be reaching into. We want to be sitting squarely in the middle and being able to reach out on both sides to bring people together, to bring that reconciliation. And again, it always goes back to all of the previous Beatitudes, because one does build on the other. Those people... This is something that I think I would want to strive into more than anything else. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Those people that are willing to stand in the gap. The firefighters, the police officers, the paramedics. I see those as peacemakers. There is a broken thing, a broken situation happening, and they're going to step in to that to do their part. Which is why I have a preference for that group of people. And then blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Those people who, for the sake of their faith, are being persecuted. They're being hurt. They're being wounded. They are being killed for their perspective, that they believe so strongly in this Christ that we know and love, that they are willing to absorb that. I love all of that. Interesting thing here is verses 11 and 12 change. You ever notice? Maybe you haven't. The first 8 Beatitudes, the 8 Beatitudes are all, blessed are they, blessed are those. Christ is sitting on this mountainside talking to his core, and he's talking in general terms here. Verses 11 and 12, they change. The verbiage changes. Blessed are you. So he's going from, well, here's everybody else, here's the teaching of the day, but let me focus in on you as my committed, as my apprentices. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad. So in the middle of the persecution, when the middle of people lying about you, in the middle of all of that, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For the same way they persecuted you, for the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So you start aligning yourselves with people that have gone before, those people that we're all reading about throughout the scripture. And I think of my grandfather, and he was minister in several churches. My uncles, ministers. My father, minister. I think of those people. And I want to reach into and serve into the legacy that they have built. And when bad things happen, when people get upset at me, it's, in some ways, it really helps me to put things into perspective. These are the same things that my grandfather, my uncles, my father have gone through. And you know what? It's okay, because I'm putting myself in good company. As I'm closing, I'm going to show a video here, or actually, technically, the booth is going to show the video. It's an insurance commercial from Thailand. So it's not in English. There are English subtitles. But it really starts to show a wonderful image of what it would look like if we are living into the Beatitudes. And then I'll come back and close things off. Thanks, guys.